Because right now I feel I'm like on a stream of creativity, and it's consuming me like 24 hours. Like, of course I have like life or work, but I'm very energized to be creating all the time. And I wasn't like that before, and I know I am like that now, but I don't know if I'm gonna be like that in the future.
You're listening to Well Fed. I'm your host, John Sorrentino, a designer based out of New York, and on each episode, I sit down to talk with one of my creative heroes, individuals whose work, style, and ideas I admire and continue to be inspired by every day. We discuss their past, present, and everything in between. Hey, before we start, I'm trying out something new this season, and I need your help. I'll be releasing episodes every Tuesday until the final episode, and I'll be keeping my fingers crossed that I can keep up. I would love to get your feedback after every release, and I'll be giving away stickers and pins to everyone that helps out as a thank you. All you have to do is leave a review on Apple Podcasts or share the podcast on social media. Take a screenshot and DM it to me on Instagram or Twitter at WellFedPodcast, and I'll send you some good old-fashioned snail mail. With that, enjoy the episode. On this episode, my guest is Brazilian motion and 3D artist Lucas Camargo. You may have seen some of his fictional characters online through social media under the name Untitled Army. His work portrays emotions and experiences we are all too familiar with, and prior to letting his creations run wild, Lucas has worked as a creative director in the advertising industry. He now says he's just a puppet of a bigger art master plan that might take him nowhere, but helps him to struggle through life. Lucas, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
I am very excited to have you as a guest because your work is very unique. It stands out in a lot of what's being created in culture today. Yeah. But you're also very hard to find online in some of your past experience. Before we jump into some of that, you just came back from a conference called Pictoplasma.
Yes, exactly.
How was that?
That was amazing. It was a first time I speak as an artist, and it was like a great experience to see other artists speaking and like kind of share some of similar struggles and some of similar feelings, but at the same time like getting in contact with people that loves my work for kind of like the first time in like person, not just online through Instagram. So it was like a really positive experience for me. I got really excited and more like wanted to do this kind of like talks and feeling like inspired to talk about my work.
And Pictoplasma is specifically a conference around character development.
Yes, exactly. So they've been around for a long time. I remember seeing them when I was in college. Like they had like these big books of like characters, kind of like pulling many illustrators' characters, and the characters are always like weird or have like something special and unique. And they got in contact with me in the beginning of the year, since my work was like starting to be around like many social media stuff. So they saw me and they kind of invited me to be part of it. And I was so happy because I followed them like for like more than 10, 12 years or something. So I was really excited to be part of like the conference here in New York, because they're based in Berlin, but they have a version of it in New York. So it was really fun.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
You grew up in Brazil.
Yeah, so I was born in Brazil, like it's this small like town in Brazil called, the translation would be like New Horizon. And it's like in the São Paulo state, which is like the main state in Brazil, but I grew up there. And I did design school when I was around 17, and I started my career as a designer, and eventually I ended going to São Paulo, which is a capital in São Paulo state, and I started work with advertising, which was like in Brazil, advertising is sort of like a hub for many different creatives because there's not much outlets of creative. Like in US, for instance, if you write a book, you write a book. If you make a film, you make film. Like in Brazil, like all these people are in the agency because there's not much places that pay.
Sure. That's part of the job as well.
Yes.
It's the only real outlet that helps supplement that life.
Exactly. So I ended at agency and I worked there. It was a Saatchi in Brazil, and I worked there for a long time. And eventually, through another agency here in US, Ogilvy, I kind of like came in 2010 to New York. Yeah.
So you went to design school when you were around 17. Before that, were you already somewhat leading into a creative path? Were you interested in that? What were you doing when you were younger?
So it's funny because it might be like probably one of my first memories is like trying to copy like a Scooby-Doo like drawing. So I always memory of like drawing, it's there since the beginning. Growing up, I always like even like bought comics more for the imagery than for the stories and stuff. And when I was teenager, I was very into caricatures. So there's a part of my life that I was like doing like caricatures and I was like being part of like tournaments in Brazil. And that's the thing, like I really love like many like different areas of creativity. And I started with that, like more into illustration and eventually I went to design school, which was something that I was like, okay, maybe being like a designer, I can make money. Like, because I was like, it's hard if you want to be artist in Brazil. There's not much where you can go, and like design seemed like to be like a place and kind of let me like, okay, design might be like
financially might be able to help you out.
Yeah.
What kind of characters were you drawing?
I mean, up to like very recently, my whole artistic like experience was much more like, in the beginning was much more like, okay, I want to learn how to draw. So everything I was into was like kind of like getting to really do like a well proportioned, like everything like perfect kind of stuff. And when I was doing caricatures, it was when I kind of started to distort shapes and things, but very like more organic and crazy like shapes out of it. But I always love like illustrate, and eventually that led me into like start to do like weird characters when it was when I was already like an adult, when I was on ad agency.
Okay. Because some of the work now, I mean, you know, some of the work that I've come in contact to and I'm very familiar with now is almost a result of that, being able to explore as a child with, you know, form and figure and these abstractions. So you go through design school, you eventually end up at Saatchi and Saatchi in Latin America and Brazil. Yeah. What was some of the work that you were coming across while you were exploring the industry?
Well, when I was on the agency, like I was mainly like working with digital stuff. And I remember when I went to São Paulo is when I really got exposed to like some sort of graffiti culture. And even like I was friends with like these amazing guys called Mulheres Barbadas. It's like bearded women. And these guys were like amazing, like a duo, like illustrating. They kind of like have a really like fun like characters and stuff. I remember like seeing that and like, oh, I love that. So I got exposed to this whole culture of like very, very colorful like street art and like stuff. And then is when I kind of like started to explore more like this like, like developing like a style or something like that. So it was when I was starting to work with advertising and expose it to like this kind of like places, because São Paulo is like a very interesting city. Like there's so many like amazing artists doing like street art that's like unbelievable. So you get like really the Gêmeos, which is like one of the famous ones, like twin brothers. They're just like amazing, colorful artwork. So in like my time in São Paulo was like very inspiring by being exposed to that, because when I was in the inner country area, I was more in a bubble. But then in there, I was kind of like more exposed, and then it was when I actually, the Untitled Army is something people hear now and are recognizing now with these characters, but it's something, it started there.
So that name has been with you for a while then.
Yes, and it's funny because it's like I didn't plan the name, but the name now to me makes a lot of sense to what I do. But when I started doing it, like I was more like, I want to come up with like a name and so I can do like art, but I didn't knew what I wanted to do. And then I remember I didn't speak English before I came to US, so zero English. I remember like opening like a Photoshop, and there's like always on Photoshop, there's like Untitled on the top. And that thing to me was a word that I couldn't see Untitled. I would see like Untitled, or like I would see like a mix.
You would try to translate it in your head. Okay.
So I really liked the sequence of characters in that word, and like there was something, then I realized, okay, it's like not like no name or something like that. So then I like it, and it was a kind of like I mixed it with army because I wanted to be like, oh, that's cool, like army, because like I have like so many styles, and like so I kind of mashed that into. For me, it was kind of like I created that name, and it was like a side project always, like because advertising can be like very frustrating for art directors if they have an sort of like need to
Produce outside
and kind of like express themselves. So I always like in the beginning I remember thinking like, oh, I'm gonna be like do like Batman. During the day I'm gonna be like Bruce Wayne, and at night I'm gonna be like doing art and stuff and being like punk and being Batman. But that was sort of like the way I saw in the beginning, and kind of it was with me all this time. Like all the time I was doing advertising, I had the project with me. So if I dig, like I have so many drawings, and like I was like exploring oil painting, like exploring like different medias, always kind of like trying to up my craft because it's something I really like to be involved in the craft. And eventually the Untitled Army was like a gag. It was like just a name that I had that recently it kind of, I embraced it back when I kind of like started to do these characters I am doing now.
So it's interesting to hear that Untitled Army is a result of even as far back as when you were in Brazil.
Yeah.
And it's a side hustle.
Yeah.
Something that you've probably had for more than 15 years.
Yeah.
And your work at that time is taking form in paintings and illustrations and drawings, all the while you're holding down a job in advertising.
Yeah.
And very much, I think, a familiar story for a lot of creatives here in the city. You know, they have to figure out that kind of medium of holding down and paying rent while also being able to kind of express themselves outside in the ways that they want to.
Yeah.
After a few years at the agency in Sao Paulo, you said you were able to kind of make the shift or the move over to New York. How'd that come about?
Yeah, so at that time there's no like Instagram or anything. There's like Flickr.
Tumblr maybe?
Yeah, like
Tumblr.
So I had like some of my art on those websites, and somebody at Ogilvy here, a Brazilian guy, he saw me and he invited me to a freelance, and eventually they liked my work and they just like hire me. So I kind of was like, I had like already like a good position in Brazil, like my career was like established, but then I came here and it was like I didn't speak any English. So like at the beginning it was like this experience of like first you go like you're born again, because like you don't speak a language, you have to work on that language, and the way you speak influence how people perceive you, and like you might be a genius inside, but outside people might be like, oh, this is like a dumb guy, like, or something like that.
There's a big barrier that
there is a
barrier.
Yeah, and but at the same time, like there was that opportunity. I mean, I remember like when I was 17 in college and I was in the inner country area, I was fine with life. I was like kind of like okay, but as I was growing older and like being pushed like to the capital, and like once I got to the capital, that thing like, okay, that's enough, and then what's next? So getting outside of the country was that sort of like, okay, I have to go out, because the first time I remember like traveling to another country, I felt like, dude, like I'm missing out a lot of stuff. I cannot be locked in Brazil. I need to go out. Because I do feel like I have some sort of talent, and I need to explore that in a way. So that was kind of like the feeling behind. Like I got an opportunity and I was like, okay, I'll do it. Even if I don't speak English, I'll try like start from scratch. Yeah, exactly.
So were you, so in that, I imagine there was a little bit of a transition period where you were kind of like freelancing remote, and eventually you then made the move over to New York full time.
So it was like I was working, I was full-time in Brazil.
Oh, okay.
I got a job, I quit, and I came. It was kind of like...
Oh, cool.
So it was that kind of switch, yeah.
What was the work involved at Ogilvy?
So Ogilvy was like basically... I work with like clients like IKEA or American Express. So I was like working with IBM. Like, so I work from digital work to films, and like the work in there, like the difference in the agencies in Brazil and US. Like in Brazil, you work a lot. Here you work a lot, but in Brazil you work a lot. So I was kind of it's like Rambo. So when I got here, like I saw all these people struggling, and for me it was like a day in the park because
This
I was
is easy.
because I was like,
That's so
guys,
cool.
you don't know how it is in Brazil. Like I was like, and so I had this. It's almost like a feeling like the challenge wasn't like that much because like I was exposed to something like way more like stressful. But with time, like I felt the stress was more not being able to be creating this stuff that I wanted to create. Like here, I felt there was more constraint creatively, like because of course it's different market, like it's different, even like visual language, and I was exposed to a language that's much more colorful, much more like in your face, and here it's a little bit different. So in the beginning it was fun, but with time it was just like making me like tired and not like being too much happy about it. Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit about like you were doing a cross between digital and film, and I just want to clarify a little bit. What defines digital work for you?
Yeah, so digital, like for instance, when I was in Brazil, I was mainly working with digital. So at that time, I was creating like websites, and it was a different period. It was like 10 years ago, and that time there was like Flash, which was like this animation tool. So
Yes.
I was like king of Flash. I would animate things and make them like look like amazing. So there was like this explosion of like hot sites, and today there's not much. That's gone because it's a different like it's more a product focus. It's not much about like these little campaigns on websites. So that was digital for me. It was like working with websites more creatively. It was not so like product. And then eventually I move into like creating like the whole campaigns, which means like I would take care of film and take care of like print and other parts of it, including digital. And with time I would have a team that would be dealing with stuff, and I was more exposed at some points, like more into like just producing films, which would be the more like responsibility from
Commercials,
for the
bigger campaigns.
for the creatives. Yeah, so that's a kind of like transition, and I like it because I was exposed to digital culture. I learned a lot. And then with time, I was moving more into like the films and the commercials that are more traditional, and it was a fun experience to be traveling around the world to shoot like commercials. So it was like fun, yeah.
And you sort of talked about how like you were able to be more creative in the Latin America market than when you were in New York. And I'm curious, is that just, what do you think informs that, or what do you think defines that kind of, that constraint? You know, like why do you think that is?
Well, I always thought that first, like I was saying, like I thought for me, like I always saw the Brazilian agencies like this funnel of much more creative people. So then the competition was much more, for creativity was much more up. So then it's kind of like junior people are like amazing. Everybody was like amazing. In here, it's not that people are not like good. It's just a different thing. It's just like, since all this creativity is just like spread out in the agency, it's just like a job. And I feel like it's less the pressure about being creative, it's more pressure of the business. But this thing is changing in Brazil as well. So everything now is less creative and more focused on data and like numbers and all that stuff.
Is there a moment of this, or is this a part of this is on the client side as well? Like they're asking for more, or they're asking for projects or concepts that are a little bit more informed by data, but a little bit safer on the creative.
Exactly.
They don't want to like overstep or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. Yeah, the more we know about stuff, less creative we are with everything. It's like movies, like we're never gonna have like periods like the 80s where everything was guessing. So then we're producing everything, and then you have the best and the worst. And now you just have the middle, or something that feels like bland, because you know what people are gonna buy and you know where you need to hit. Like, and it's the same thing with creativity in general, because like the agencies, they know like the market, they know the target, so they know what they have to do. It's less about like coming up with something that nobody's expecting and getting like this big like top mark of like being innovative.
It's like more reward.
Yeah, it's more kind of like everything's getting more plain in a way, but yeah, that's something I felt like over the years, kind of getting more eaten up by data and numbers and that kind of stuff.
Are there any brands or agencies or studios that you think are kind of reacting differently or actually putting out more creative, like that things that you admire that stand out to you in the industry today?
I don't know. I feel like agencies, the way they are, they either gonna die or evolve to something else. I feel future is gonna go around like content. I feel, because content is something like everything can be content, like audio can be content, like films or animations, like everything. When it's seen through that like lens, you can be like small, and then you can work direct with the client. So I think whoever is doing that direction, I think they might be in the sort of like right path, because it's less about like, oh, I'm going to be here like crunching like ideas for months, which is what I felt in the agency, like crunching ideas that never got produced. It's going to be much more like about like who is telling like good stories and partner with them. I think brands are in the future might be going more towards that. I want to tell a story with this partner that has this voice, then getting somebody that's just like, I feel like agencies that the way they are now, they just become commodity. They just become something that is being around for a long time now, and they're just like, okay, give us your money, we're gonna give you some ideas, but you're never getting like too much really action happen, or I don't know, I just felt like not producing that much.
I very much agree with that. This agency convention is shifting now, you know, within the industry of design and creative and advertising. Agencies have to do so much more now. I mean, I've seen a little bit of just being on the opposite side of the hiring of the agency, so I completely agree with you on there. How long did you spend at Ogilvy before your next move, which I wasn't able to find? So, I mean, could you kind of fill in the gaps a little bit?
Yeah, that's interesting, because Ogilvy, I remember I got to US. In 6 months, I knew I hated it.
The US or the working?
But here's the thing, like I knew like advertising wasn't for me. I kind of thought like Ogilvy might be my last agency, and it was. The way in the beginning, I felt, because I just felt like, I don't know, like it's not connecting with me. The work, yeah. There's nothing wrong with the agents. Like all agents are the same. It's just, and there are people that loved working with advertising. I'm just saying like, I wasn't the right person, the right creative to be in that environment. But in my mind, it was like, it doesn't work for me to be jumping around agencies in US. I'm just going to stick here. I know I don't like it, but it's okay. I'll do the best I can. And I did the best I could all the time I was there. But on my head, I always had this dream of like becoming an artist and getting out of there and like doing something else, which took a long time because I had to figure out green card and a lot of stuff in the middle. So when it came to that point, it was already like 8 years gone. And I hated it on the first 6 months. Yeah.
Wow. So you really stuck it out.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned that, you know, one is like the decision because you were dealing with kind of the process of getting a green card and things like that.
Yeah.
In terms of like starting to build this runway to become an artist, what were some of the things that you did? Was it just like putting in the hours, getting out of work and then putting in more hours? Yeah.
So my plan was like, the way my work is now, it wasn't planned. It's an accident. What I was doing was actually different, because when I was in the agency, I figured like I like 3D and I like animation. Like animation was kind of like, because when I was in college, I thought like, oh, I might work like with different areas of design. And I did that. I worked in print for a long time. I work on digital, I work on films. So I work like on all these things, and animation and directing was this thing that I never had done for real. And like 2 years before I quit Ogilvy, I kind of put in my head like, that's something I want to do. Like I had like played with 3D before, but I never really learned. So what I did is like, I literally started to watch every single YouTube video, like 24 hours. I was like watching everything and like trying to learn as much as I could, because I was like already old in my career as a creative. Like I was in a point that's kind of like, okay, and that's why it took so long, because you get to a point that you're too attached and you're too comfortable with your health insurance, like and all that stuff, that you feel like the jump is going to be like the hit.
You're jumping off a higher building.
Yeah,
so
the hit's going to be like a lot when you jump. So I was preparing myself, almost like creating this parachute of like, okay, I'm gonna learn all this stuff. So when I quit, I might be able to like figure something. So I learned 3D in a short period of time, and I started to produce these little animations that had like little cars and like that are kind of like famous like movies homage. And that thing, like it was like a way to like learn 3D, and at the same time was kind of like getting me exposed. So all this movement of like learning 3D, eventually I was friend with like a design studio owned by Brazilian guys called Roof Studio. And we start to talk about, oh, maybe if I quit, like maybe I could work with you guys, you know, because they have done work for me at Ogilvy.
Oh,
like
cool.
They had produced like work for me.
So you already had that
So
relationship.
I knew them and I loved their work, and they're like Brazilian. So we had like a lot in common. So I was kind of like getting my head around, okay, I'm going to quit. I'm going to make less money, but I think it's like a good experience. And it took me like around 2 years to actually quit and like being able to move on, because I was learning all this stuff. And what happened is like, I didn't like these characters and this stuff. That's the area that you're not going to find anywhere how this started and why it started.
Sure.
Because that it's where the not fun, but kind of like the irony of everything happens is like, so the same week I was quitting Ogilvy, my wife left me. So it was like I was building up this kind of like, I'm gonna get out of advertising, everything's gonna be fine. But I didn't realize that it wasn't only me that was unhappy. My wife was like unhappy too. And it happened that the same week when I quit Ogilvy, I was ready to move on. She like broke up with me.
So there was a lot of there's a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like this jumping into this uncertainty of your job, like also your relationship was.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so there was all that was like, it's almost like I have to quit as soon as I can, but I wasn't doing that, and I was dragging like for a long time, like quitting. And when I did, she was like over it already, and that to me was like, oh my God, like I did all of that, like 10, like whatever, like 7 years in US, all this work, everything I've done, like for nothing. I was kind of like starting like a new job that I was like very insecure about, because I started in the studio and like the guys were like, I learned 3D, but the guys are like using like another 3D software. So I was like, fine, everything I learned is useless.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna have to learn in a month like everything again. So it was like this period where I kind of like, I was broken. I was kind of like, fuck, like my work is, I don't know where it's going. I had this idea of, okay, I want to be like a director. I want to work on my art. But my art was always like escape, was always like a aesthetic explorations of my craft. But there was never like a message behind it. Mm. And that was something like I was kind of a little bit frustrated, because I never found like really a voice for everything I did before that moment. So when that happened to me, like it's when the Entitled Army actually
came back.
Born. Yes, it came back. And it was like, it's an experience that it started like very, like it was hard. Like the beginning was really hard, because I remember like the first maybe 3 months, I was like on the couch, like I was like crying on like Curb Your Enthusiasm. I was crying like on
watching movies.
Yeah, like everything was like, it's
emotional.
Emotional.
Yeah,
I can't.
Well, you were going through a lot at the time. Holy cow.
So I was like, and at the same time, I was not producing anything. I was kind of like very like feeling like a big failure in that sense, because it was like, I don't have anything to say. I was kind of like trying to fix and like maybe trying to go back with my wife, and like nothing was working. And there was a funny thing, because I remember after like a few months, I remember there was one thing that always stuck in my head. I remember watching like a documentary of, there was this artist called Crumb. He was like famous in the 80s, 70s. And I saw this documentary of him like a long time ago. I remember seeing him like, cause he always carries around like a sketchbook and like a pen, and he's always like doing like line work. And I saw that in the documentary, him on a bus station, a bus stop. And I was like, oh man, that's so cool. I wish I had that like will of going out and like be drawing, like, and not, I remember was when I was in this dark time, like, it came back to me, this image of like a romantic artistic thing of like going out and be sketching on a coffee shop and be out, like
taking in your surroundings.
Yeah, because I was very like much more stuck at home and not going out, like just being by myself, that kind of stuff. But I was like, dude, I'm alone. There's nothing left. It's just like I have to get out. So that's when everything started. Everything I have now started on that point of me like walking out, going to the near coffee shop, sitting down, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna sketch without judgment. I'm gonna like embrace chaos. I'm gonna just like draw whatever comes to my mind. And in the beginning I was like, oh, that's a silly thing. And then I did that 1 day, 2 days, I did for a week, 2 weeks, a month. And I realized I was doing that. I started to do that every day. It became like a ritual. And it was interesting because the beginning, the drawings were like very abstract, but with time they started to become like I would have like figures, like human figures, and I could see with time there's like some themes around like my marriage, some themes around like me thinking about life and stuff. So there was a period before I was doing the characters I do now where I was kind of like digesting.
It was like working through emotions. You're working through a lot of thoughts that you're dealing internally with. And I think it's interesting because like you mentioned a few things. Like one, you start to learn 3D modeling. Like at the very beginning, you start to teach yourself this through like any means necessary. So YouTube videos and things like that.
Yeah.
But then you're using, and what I was interested to ask you is like you were working through characters that you had grown up with. So like maybe some of this is more recent, but like I saw like you were into Ghostbusters and you're into Thriller and you're into Star Wars. Yeah. And I know there's probably more recent versions of those works, but that was interesting to you. For you were able to then kind of bring that into being interested to learning these things. And then as you start to figure out your process on how you're going to create work and potentially try to find your voice, it's something that you're practicing every day. Yeah. And again, you're working through emotions and thoughts in your head that you probably have never been exposed to, and there's a lot to kind of break down. Yeah. Some of your characters, the abstractions of them are almost like poems.
Yeah, and that's interesting because there is like a side of me, like you're saying, like I really love like pop culture in general. Like that's something always is still in my work. But I always was like, if you see my previous work, they were like very busy. Like there's like a lot of details, like, and the stuff I do now, they're like very simple things. And that it kind of like one thing that happens to me, it's like when I started to sketch and I was just like really, at some point I wasn't thinking about it. I was just like drawing. But after a few months, I remember some of the drawings, I was even like started to like writing like balloons on it with some like quotes or ideas. So I felt like a need of saying something, right? But at the same thing, the visuals are not doing it. And I was struggling because I had something to say. My drawings were not saying that. So one thing that happens, like at the same time I was sketching and I was doing this stuff, like I was living my life. So I was kind of like starting to go out with other people. I was like, it was like a renaissance of everything I loved. So I was kind of like, even like the sketches for me was kind of like revisiting myself in a way of everything I loved and kind of like going to a core of like whatever I wanted to say. So there were like a few things that happened. Like one, there was like this kind of need of saying something, the things I felt and I was thinking about. And another thing was kind of like, I started to get exposed and I sometimes I get very pragmatic. Although like I love chaos, I like to understand what's going on with me. So I started to figure out the sketches were kind of like trying to say something. And at some point, the forms were getting like more simple and more clear. and to a point that I started to do characters that were like, to me in the beginning they were like silly, because they were like just like simple constructions, like simple characters doing things. But then I started to realize the characters, the more simple they were, the more strong the message on them, because all the aesthetic thing was out, and I was just getting to the core of like the ideas I wanted. I was like, and then I started to like get very curious about like metaphors and like surrealism and all these kind of like movements. And there was one artist that I love to mention every time. That's a filmmaker called Alejandro Jodorowsky. He is somebody that I stumbled on YouTube, and I saw him talking about all these parts of like archetypes and metaphors. Like his films are like very like crazy. He was doing stuff in the 70s, and his movies are kind of stuff that you watch it, you don't understand what's going on, but something that it keeps like inside of you, like churning like for a few days. And I got curious about like how people, like a lot of these artists are like creating imagery that sometimes like they are talking straight to something inside of us, and we cannot even comprehend what's going on. Like we're just like communicating into this like raw level. So I started to give myself more of a direction into that way of understanding what I was trying to say, and kind of like putting that in a cohesive way with my designer side, which likes aesthetics and all that stuff. So
textures, colors.
Yeah. So the characters were like being shaped by like a voice that I had, and this idea that like the message that I want to talk about, which is like relationships and like love and like existence and everything that I keep thinking all the time. So that's where the first character is born. They were born around this sort of like need of talking what I was feeling about my marriage, about life. And there is a funny thing that happens when you lose like bigger things, that you're closer to freedom in a way. Mm-hmm. Because once I lost like my wife, I lost my job, that kind of stuff released me to be free to explore some things that I would be before like afraid. And that's why I like the Untitled Army. It was a name that it started like more than 10 years ago, but when I revisit, I was like, oh, this is perfect, because I don't want to sign my name on these things anymore. Mm-hmm. So I'm gone. I died. I'm dead. And that gives me freedom to do whatever I want. So I can expose my ideas without having the fear of being judged. And sometimes people think it's like a collective. Like they don't think it's like one person doing it. And I love that. I love to not being like constrained by my name and who I am. So I can do stuff that sometimes are like very... they're like heavy, sometimes they get dark, but there's always like a message that people connect with them. It's not, what I want with this is just to allow people to unleash things they have inside of them, connect with the characters, have a giggle, have an emotion, and move on. That's kind of like what I feel good about like doing this art. Like it started like almost like becoming like a therapy for me, because every day and I do that every day. I do wake up 7 a.m. or 8 a.m., go to a coffee shop and I draw. I give that 1 hour every day to sketching. It's like my ritual every day. And it's a space where I found like I'm doing like sort of a therapy. It's like a diary, but people don't know it. People just see these characters like, and they don't know sometimes like some of these characters are like really born out of like a tough situation or something like very deep and like that I was frustrated or that I was going through. So there is a lot going on in them, although they're like simple. They have like this friendly and colorful like skin on it. But the born of them was like all this journey of like me trying to find myself again, trying to find a voice, trying to find like a way to express what I am feeling, you know, like and all the struggles I have in life. Like, so it was like kind of like born out of like that thing.
There's a lot.
Yeah, I know. It's a lot. Yeah.
So I just want to see if we can maybe piece together from when you started to work with your friends over at Roof Studio. How long were you there for before, or was it another kind of campaign of working there while also working on what would become Untitled Army?
Well, I still work with them. That's my so because that's the thing. Like I work with them as a full-time director. So my career, like that makes money, it's with them. So when I started there, like they, of course, like they were like super. They embraced me, not being like a technical guy, but they knew I had like a creative power. So I kind of like started in the beginning more like learning stuff, but with time I learned like, okay, I know how to direct like a film, I know how to direct stuff, and I'm getting like more comfortable with this stuff. But in parallel, all the work I'm doing with the Untitled Army, it's influencing what I'm doing there as a director, because with time, like people are recognizing me by my artistic voice, and they are kind of looking for either for what I do, and even like my creative process is influenced by everything I learned in these last 2 years, because it's not only like a journey of like healing myself, but it was a journey of learning how I am as an artist, which is completely different from what I was before. Like when I was in advertising, it was a different mindset. Now, I never liked to call myself artist ever. I thought it was like a scam, like saying that. But now I don't care, because like the feeling is different. Like I feel like now I created some sort of like, not that I created like, but something sparked it, that I feel my work there, a Roof, and my personal work is like one. It's the same creative mind behind it. It's
become this like loop of informing your exercises and your rituals, kind of inform the work that you're then outputting for either clients or, you know, professionally, whatever it may be. You sort of touched on a little bit about how your characters have slowly but surely become simplified to having these kind of really interesting textures and colors, and the messages become stronger over time as you begin to sort of chip away at this bigger, larger theme or idea. And as we're sitting here in your apartment, I noticed that you also have a ton of different paintings around your characters. What forms are you experimenting with these ideas outside and with these characters? I see online it's a lot of 3D and digital. And here it's physical as well. Is that something that you're always playing around with?
Yeah, so I always love to do like physical things, like oil paintings, or like all my 3D stuff start with my sketchbook. I walk around with like this tiny sketchbook that looks like a Bible, but it's with me all the time. And so the physical part for me is very important. I do love to have my hands on stuff. And since I learned 3D and it's something I love, like it was like natural for me to start exploring the characters in the 3D world. And when I first started, I was trying to kind of like break with something like, because the physical world, like there is one thing that was damaging me a little bit, because like if you see like one of like these big paintings, this was something that was with me like for months. So it wasn't something that was allowing me to evolve, because the technique was in front of me, was between me and like the next me. So once I removed the technique and started to do the 3D in a way that was more fast, then I could move to the next character, the next character, the next character.
It's almost like not being precious about it.
Yeah, not being too pressure, and finding like a pipeline or a way of working on it. The way I work now, at least on this character, is like I created a way that I can do it like in a few hours, like a new one. If I wanted to do that from scratch, like before, it would take like forever, maybe like would take like 2 weeks, and those
you have to do all the technicals of like building the canvas,
building
like
a lot of stuff like that.
So removing the friction allows for you to kind of just jump back into that idea.
I realized once I removed the friction, I started to, because like creating the next piece, to me, it's always that thing that it's making my art evolve like so fast. So in the course of like less than a year, like it exploded, because I am moving very fast I'm not only like sketching every day, but I'm putting out a 3D version of it, which is like a fully colorful thing every other day. Like, so all these kind of like sketch in 3D taking turns on my timeline on Instagram, like was making me move faster in the, not only like the ideas, like, or getting better with how I form the ideas, because in the beginning, of course, right now I kind of like have a way in to kind of create the characters. In the beginning it was much more harder. I would be much more stuck into like similar things, but now I kind of like flow more like into more different constructions. I'm being like less concerned about what's the end result. I'm more concerned about making the next one and seeing how different it's gonna be and that kind of stuff.
So you've mentioned that like over the last year or so, your work has started to pick up speed. People are starting to notice it. I came in contact through social media as well. And, you know, now you have these tools like Instagram and Behance. I know a lot of your work is Behance as well. Is there a goal that you have in mind as you continue to work through at this rapid pace? Or is it just continue to kind of build on your craft and continue to hone that skill?
Yeah, I think about it. In the moment, or at least the last year, I was less worried about the future and more worried about the present and trying to be focused on now. There's a few things I don't know, like, because right now I feel I'm like on a stream of creativity and it's consuming me like 24 hours. Like, of course I have like life or work, but I'm very energized to be creating all the time. And I wasn't like that before. And I know I am like that now, but I don't know if I'm gonna be like that in the future. And I've seen like other artists, like every artist have like a period of time where they're connected with something. It's like their own zeitgeist or something that is their whatever stream of like creativity is like very strong. I don't know when mine is gonna go away or if it's gonna be like this forever. I remember like seeing like Bob Dylan talking about like, oh, when I was like, whatever the period of time, I don't know, I was just like sitting down in 5 minutes, I had like blowing the wind, like that kind of stuff. I cannot reproduce it now that I'm like old. It was like that period of time, there was some sort of like stream of consciousness that was going on. It was like right there, so I was just taking notes. So that's kind of like how I feel. I'm like taking notes on something that I crossed on that's very rich. So I'm very worried about documenting all of that. And the execution to me is something I want to expand as much as I can, because I do have, I can show you later, but I do have like the characters I started to do like in 3D, like printed.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
So I am thinking like doing like big sculptures. I'm thinking of like doing oil paintings with them. So I think the 3D right now is the only media that I can express like fast and have some sort of like finished product. But in my head, I have more than 600 sketches done in less than a year. So I have too many ideas to be carving out, to execute it somehow. So I know I want to be starting to do like big paintings. That's my next, I think, goal, because I don't want to get constrained into the 3D environment. I feel my work, I want to move as broad as I can. I love that to be in the 3D space, but I want to be into the art space as well more. So that's why I feel like doing sculptures and doing like paintings is like what I have in my head, but I'm not too worried because I know I have the ideas. I just need the time to paint them, and that time will come. Yeah,
it's really exciting as you show me this 3D figure in person, and I'll make sure to have it somewhere either on the website.
Cool.
But Lucas, where can people find more of your work, and as you continue to push the mediums, where can they stay in contact with you?
I guess like Instagram, it's my main channel, is where people get in touch with me, and it's where I post my daily sketches and all my work is there. So if it's the closer you can get to me, because I'm like there all the time, like, and sometimes like of course I update my Behance and my website, but Instagram seems to be the tool that I can talk to people. And if you guys will like follow me on Instagram, you're gonna be like on top of your game with me.
What is your Instagram username?
It's Untitled Army. Yeah.
Lucas, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. This is like the first time I speak on a podcast, and I'm very happy for the experience.
Thank you so much. This podcast is produced by me, John Sarantino, out in Jersey City, New Jersey. Editing, mixing, and music are all done by my friend Kevin Bendis in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. Definitely check him out. You can find out more about Well-Fed and where to listen at wellfedpodcast.com or on social media at Well-Fed Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you soon.